An unpublished World War I photo surfaces and casts doubt on a century of official records. Emily Torres climbed the narrow stairs to her grandmother's attic in Springfield, Massachusetts, dust motes dancing in the afternoon light. Her grandmother, Dorothy, had passed away 3 weeks earlier at the age of 102, and Emily had been tasked with sorting through a lifetime of belongings. The attic was crowded with boxes, old furniture, and forgotten memories. Emily worked methodically, labeling items for donation or storage, until she found a leather trunk tucked beneath a moth-eaten quilt. The trunk was locked, but the key hung from a rusted chain attached to the handle. Inside, she found letters tied with ribbon, a faded uniform jacket, and a small wooden box. Emily opened the box carefully. Inside was a single photograph, remarkably well preserved, mounted on thick cardboard. The image showed approximately 60 soldiers standing in formation in front of a stone building. The uniforms were American, the date handwritten on the back, November 10, 1918. Emily's breath caught. November 10, 1918, one day before the armistice that ended World War I. But something was wrong. She looked closer at the photograph, her historian's training kicking in. The soldiers weren't smiling. Many had bandages visible on their arms and heads. Some leaned on crutches. And behind them, the building was clearly a hospital, not a military barracks. Beneath the photograph was a folded letter, yellowed and fragile. Emily unfolded it carefully and began to read. The handwriting was shaky, the ink faded, but the words were clear. They told us it would be over by morning. They lied. We were sent back to the line at dawn. 32 men in this photograph died on the last day of the war. The government buried the truth with them. Emily's hands trembled. This wasn't just a family artifact. This was evidence of something terrible. Emily brought the photograph to Dr. Marcus Webb, a military historian at Boston University who specialized in World War I. When she laid it on his desk, he leaned forward immediately, his eyes widening. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice tight with excitement. "My grandmother's attic. It belonged to my great-grandfather, Private Thomas Hayes. He served in the 77th Infantry Division." Marcus pulled out a magnifying glass and examined the photograph closely. The 77th, the Liberty Division. They saw heavy combat in the Meuse-Argonne offensive. He paused, studying the faces. "But this photograph, Emily, do you understand what you're looking at?" She shook her head. November 10th, 1918, the day before the armistice was signed. According to official records, most units had ceased major combat operations by then. The fighting was supposed to be winding down. He pointed to the bandaged soldiers. "But these men are clearly wounded, recently wounded, and they're standing in formation like they're about to deploy." Emily handed him the letter. Marcus read it in silence, his expression growing darker with each line. 32 men died on the last day of the war, he repeated slowly. "From this single unit. That's, Emily, that's a massacre." "But how is that possible?" Emily asked. The armistice was set to take effect at 11 a.m. on November 11th. Everyone knew the war was ending. Marcus sat back in his chair, his face pale. "That's exactly why this photograph matters. Because if what this letter says is true, then someone ordered wounded soldiers back into combat knowing the war would be over in hours, and then covered it up for more than a century. Who would do that?" Marcus met her eyes. "That's what we need to find out." Marcus requested military records from the National Archives for the 77th Infantry Division, specifically focusing on November 10th, 11th, 1918. What arrived 2 weeks later was a thick file of documents, but Emily immediately noticed something strange. The casualty reports for November 11th, 1918 listed only 7 deaths from the entire division. 7 men, across thousands of soldiers, on the final day of the bloodiest war in history. "That can't be right," Emily said, spreading the documents across Marcus's office. "The letter says 32 men from just one unit died that day." Marcus pulled up digital archives on his computer, cross-referencing unit reports and battle summaries. "Look at this. The official after-action report for the 77th on November 11th says, 'No significant combat operations. Units held positions awaiting armistice.' But earlier reports from November 9th and 10 describe heavy fighting and mounting casualties." Emily found another document, a telegram sent from division headquarters to the War Department on November 12th. Final casualty figures being compiled. Preliminary count lower than expected. "Lower than expected?" Emily repeated. "That's a strange way to phrase it." Marcus nodded grimly. "Unless the expectation was high casualties, and someone decided to revise the numbers downward before they became official. Emily thought of her great-grandfather's letter. They buried the truth with them, she murmured. Marcus began searching through pension records, death certificates, and grave registrations. If 32 men had died on November 11th, there would be evidence beyond the official casualty lists. What he found was even more disturbing. Between November 10th and 15th, 1918, dozens of soldiers from the 77th Division were buried in American military cemeteries in France. But their death certificates listed various dates, some November 9th, some November 10th, some listed as died of wounds days after the armistice. They spread out the deaths, Marcus said quietly, made it look like they died before or after the final day, not on it. Emily flew to France, determined to trace the physical location in the photograph. The stone building in the background had distinct architectural features: arched windows, a red tile roof, and a bell tower visible in the distance. She worked with local historians in the Meuse-Argonne region, showing them the photograph. An archivist in Verdun recognized it immediately. "This is the field hospital in Romagne-sous-Montfaucon," he said. It was one of the largest American medical stations during the final offensive. It's still standing, actually, now a community center. Emily visited the building the next day. Standing in front of it, comparing the modern structure to the photograph, she felt a chill. This was where her great-grandfather had stood, wounded and exhausted, hours before being sent back to fight. The local archives contained hospital records from 1918, meticulously maintained by French administrators. Emily spent 2 days combing through admission logs, surgical reports, and discharge papers. On the third day, she found what she was looking for: a list of 63 American soldiers admitted to the hospital between November 8th and 10th, 1918, all from the 77th Division. The nature of their wounds ranged from shrapnel injuries to gunshot wounds to gas exposure. Beside each name was a discharge date. For most, it was November 15th or later, after the armistice. But for 32 names, the discharge date was listed as November 10th, with a single-word notation: returned. Emily's heart pounded. Returned meant sent back to their units, sent back to the front line. On the day before the war ended, she photographed every page and immediately emailed them to Marcus. His response came within an hour. "This is it. This is the proof. They were ordered back into combat while still injured." Marcus dug deeper into the command structure of the 77th Division in November 1918. The division was under the command of Major General Robert Alexander, a career officer known for his aggressive tactics and personal ambition. In the archives, Marcus found a series of telegrams exchanged between General Alexander and the American Expeditionary Forces headquarters in the days leading up to the armistice. November 9th, 1918, 3:15 p.m. General Alexander to AEF HQ. Request permission to launch final assault on enemy positions before armistice takes effect. Division ready and able. November 9th, 1918, 8:42 p.m. AEF HQ to General Alexander. Armistice expected within 48 hours. Minimize casualties. Hold current positions. November 10th, 1918, 6:20 a.m. General Alexander to AEF HQ. Enemy showing signs of retreat. Opportunity to press advantage and secure additional territory before ceasefire. November 10th, 1918, 10:15 a.m. AEF HQ to General Alexander. Armistice confirmed for November 11th, 11 Knox a.m. Cease offensive operations immediately. Marcus leaned back in his chair, stunned. The orders were clear. Stop fighting, hold positions, wait for the ceasefire. But then he found another document, a field order issued by General Alexander on the evening of November 10th, addressed to regimental commanders. All available men to advance at 600 hours November 11th. Objective: secure crossing at Meuse River before armistice. Wounded personnel cleared for combat duty to report immediately. Emily read the order over video call, her voice shaking. He disobeyed direct orders. He sent wounded soldiers into battle knowing the war would end in 5 hours. And then he covered it up, Marcus said. Revised the casualty lists, spread out the death dates, made it disappear from history. Why? Emily asked. Why would he do that? Marcus pulled up General Alexander's post-war record. After the war, he was promoted to lieutenant general. He received the Distinguished Service Medal. He became a national hero. Emily understood. If people knew he'd sacrificed soldiers for nothing, on the last day of the war, his career would have been over. Emily and Marcus began searching for descendants of the soldiers in the photograph. Using the hospital records and the names visible on uniform tags in the image, they identified 12 families still living in the United States. Most had no idea their grandfathers or great-grandfathers had been part of this story. But one family, the Carters in Philadelphia, had kept letters and diaries. Daniel Carter invited Emily to his home and showed her a diary kept by his great-grandfather, Corporal William Carter, who appeared in the photograph, third row, far right. The final entries were devastating. November 10, 1918, evening. Doctor said I shouldn't fight anymore. Shrapnel still in my shoulder. Can barely hold a rifle. But orders came down. We're going back to the line at dawn. Everyone knows the war ends tomorrow. Everyone knows this is pointless. But the general wants one last victory. November 11th, 1918, early morning. We crossed at dawn. Germans knew it was the last day too. They fought anyway. We all fought anyway. For what? Matthews died next to me. Johnson lost his leg. Thompson just gone. I made it back. Don't know how. November 11th, 1918, afternoon. War's over. We're supposed to celebrate. But all I can think about is the men who didn't make it. The general gave a speech about honor and sacrifice. I wanted to scream at him. They didn't die for honor. They died because he wanted a medal. November 15th, 1918. They're telling us not to talk about what happened on the 11th. Say it'll hurt morale. Say it's better to remember the victory, not the cost. But I'll remember. I'll remember every face. Daniel handed Emily another document. A letter from the War Department, dated 1920, addressed to William Carter. Your service and sacrifice are deeply appreciated. We ask that you refrain from public discussion of specific combat operations to preserve unit cohesion and national morale. It was a polite order to stay silent, and for a century, the survivors had obeyed. Emily and Marcus knew they had enough evidence to tell the story. They contacted the Washington Post, providing the photograph, the hospital records, the telegrams, and the diary entries. The story ran on the front page in September 2024, exactly 106 years after the events it described. The last attack, how dozens of wounded soldiers were sent to die on the final day of World War I, and the cover-up that followed. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Veterans organizations demanded investigations. Historians called it one of the most significant revelations about World War I in decades. Descendants of other soldiers came forward with their own family stories corroborating the account. The Department of Defense issued a statement acknowledging the findings and promising a full review of the records. But the most powerful response came from the public. Social media filled with images of the photograph, with people asking the same question over and over. How many more stories like this are buried in classified files? Emily appeared on national news, holding the photograph. These men didn't die for victory, she said. They died because one general wanted glory, and then their deaths were erased from history to protect his reputation. We owe them the truth. Marcus stood beside her. This photograph proves that the official narrative of World War I, the idea that fighting stopped as the armistice approached, was a lie. Men were ordered into battle on the last day, knowing the war would end in hours, and when they died, their deaths were hidden. The photograph, unpublished for 106 years, became a symbol of the forgotten casualties of war and the lies told to conceal them. The Department of Defense launched a formal investigation, assigning a team of military historians to review all records related to the 77th Infantry Division's actions on November 10-11, 1918. What they found confirmed everything Emily and Marcus had uncovered, and revealed even more. Internal memos showed that senior officers had questioned General Alexander's decision to launch the attack, but were overruled. One memo written by a colonel read, "This attack serves no strategic purpose and places men at unnecessary risk. I recommend immediate cancellation." General Alexander's response was handwritten at the bottom. Recommendation denied. Attack proceeds as ordered. The investigation also uncovered evidence that the cover-up extended beyond General Alexander. After the War Department had quietly revised casualty reports from multiple divisions, not just the 77th, to minimize the number of deaths recorded on November 11, 1918. The reason was political. Public support for the war had been fragile, and the government feared that revealing soldiers had died needlessly on the last day would provoke outrage and protests. A confidential memo from 1919 marked "Destroy after reading" had somehow survived in the archives. Final day casualties to be distributed across preceding dates to avoid public perception of waste. Emphasis to be placed on victory, not cost. The investigation's final report, released in December 2024, was unequivocal. The actions of November 11, 1918 represent a failure of command and a betrayal of trust. The subsequent cover-up compounded this failure and denied families the truth about their loved ones' deaths. The report recommended formal recognition of the soldiers who died that day and the declassification of all remaining World War I records. Emily read the report with tears in her eyes. Her great-grandfather had told the truth, and now, finally, the government was acknowledging it. On November 11, 2025, 107 years after the events, a memorial ceremony was held at Arlington National Cemetery to honor the soldiers who died on the last day of World War I. Emily stood before a newly unveiled monument, a bronze statue of a soldier looking toward the horizon, the photograph etched into the stone base. The names of all 32 men who died on November 11, 1918, were inscribed below. Descendants of 15 of the soldiers attended the ceremony, some meeting each other for the first time. They shared stories, photographs, and letters, piecing together the lives of men who had been erased from history. The Secretary of Defense spoke, his voice solemn. "We cannot undo the past. We cannot bring these men back, but we can ensure their sacrifice is remembered. We can acknowledge the truth, no matter how painful, and we can promise that their stories will never be buried again." Emily approached the microphone holding the photograph. "My great-grandfather survived that day, but he carried the weight of it for the rest of his life. He kept this photograph hidden, along with the truth, because he was told to stay silent. But he wrote down what happened, and he made sure it wouldn't be lost forever." She looked at the faces gathered before her. Veterans, historians, families, journalists. This photograph isn't just about one day in 1918. It's about every time we're told to forget, to move on, to accept the official story without question. It's about the responsibility we have to remember, even when remembering is painful. The ceremony concluded with a moment of silence. 60 soldiers stood at attention, one for each man in the photograph. The wind carried the sound of a lone bugler playing taps across the cemetery. In the months following the memorial, the photograph became one of the most viewed images in the National Archives' digital collection. Schools used it to teach about World War I, not just the battles and victories, but the human cost and the difficult questions about command, sacrifice, and truth. Emily donated the original photograph to the Smithsonian, where it was displayed alongside the letter, the hospital records, and excerpts from Corporal Carter's diary. The exhibition was titled, "The Last Attack: Uncovering the Hidden Cost of War." Marcus published a comprehensive academic paper examining command decisions on the final day of World War I across all Allied forces. His research revealed that similar incidents had occurred in French, British, and Canadian units, suggesting the problem was widespread. The Department of Defense established a task force to review other potentially suppressed records from World War I and subsequent conflicts, acknowledging that transparency, even a century later, was essential to honoring those who served. Daniel Carter, who had shared his great-grandfather's diary, worked with veterans organizations to create an oral history project documenting the stories of soldiers whose experiences had been overlooked or deliberately hidden. Emily returned to her grandmother's house one last time before it was sold. She stood in the attic where she had found the photograph, thinking about the chain of decisions that had led to this moment. Her great-grandfather's choice to keep the photograph and write the letter, her grandmother's decision to preserve them, and her own choice to seek the truth. She thought about the 60 men in that photograph, young and wounded, standing in formation hours before being sent back into battle. Some had survived, many had not, but all of them had deserved better than to be erased from history. The photograph, once hidden in a trunk, now stood as a testament to the power of truth and the responsibility of memory. And the century of official records, built on omissions and revisions, could no longer deny what the image revealed, that war's final victims are often its most forgotten, and that silence protects the powerful while betraying the dead.